Good afternoon, and thank you for all taking time to attend today's symposium. The first two Southeast Asia Development Symposiums took place during the onset of the pandemic and were focused on helping Southeast Asian countries counter the immediate impacts of the COVID-19. Unfortunately, the pandemic is not yet over for this third meeting, and vaccines remain a priority. Of 11 countries in our Southeast Asia Regional Department, 9 are on track to reach the vaccine coverage target of 70% of the population fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by the middle of 2020. 2 countries, Myanmar and Timor-Leste, are off track. Throughout the pandemic, ADB has focused on procuring vaccine and addressing bottleneck to vaccine manufacturing and delivery for our developing member countries. Some of our efforts include, first, vaccine financing through our $9 billion Asia Pacific Vaccine Access Facility. We have commitment to purchase around 1 billion vaccine doses of COVID-19 vaccines for Asia Pacific. This includes financing almost $1.2 billion to Cambodia, Indonesia, and Philippines in Southeast Asia regions. Second, emergency procurement of personnel, protectives, and also medical equipment through our partnership with UNICEF to address the immediate needs of pandemic. Third, delivering $146 million in technical assistance to support national vaccine deployment plan, cold chain system, and risk communication. Innovation has been a major feature of our technical support. In Central Asia, we supported it, a new regional cooperation strategy for multi-country coordination for pandemic preparedness and response. In India, we worked with the Ministry of Health and Welfare to establish a COVID war room and also novel digital platform for tracking the mass vaccination effort. In the Philippines, we helped scale up testing and surveillance and build a new reference laboratory. Fourth, we formed the Regulatory Vaccine Advisory Group, RVAC, to help overcome vaccine regulatory issues. This group is made up of 12 national regulatory authorities, including 5 from Southeast Asia. Fifth, ADB has supported strategic planning for new private and public vaccine manufacturing facilities in Asia and the Pacific. Sixth, we have developed the workforces for vaccine manufacturing with training for people who make the vaccine, regulate vaccine, and run vaccine trials. This workforce development aims to contribute to a more decentralized global vaccine manufacturing capacity to overcome the supply issue we have faced with COVID-19. While many countries are examining how they can develop a domestic vaccine manufacturing capacity, few understand the complexity and resources involved. To help developing member countries, we are collaborating with the International Vaccine Institute to develop a short courses on vaccine manufacturing for policymakers. This course will help senior policymakers in our developing member countries decide on and also plan for investment in vaccine manufacturing. Our speaker for this session is Dr. Anh Wartel from the International Vaccine Institute. Dr. Wartel is a Deputy Director General at IVI, responsible for clinical, regulatory, and evaluation aspects of the vaccines. Dr. Wartel will share with us a major update in COVID-19 vaccine development and the key challenges we have faced in developing and distributing vaccine equitably. It is our great pleasure to have Dr. Wartel at this session. Thank you, Dr. Wartel. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ra, for the nice introduction, the kind introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the ADB organizing committee for this invitation to speak at the Southeast Asia Development Symposium 2022. So here is the different topics I want to touch upon during this session related to the COVID-19 vaccine development and the challenges that we all have encountered over the years. So as we know, as of March 2022, there are more than 450 million cases that have been reported, including 6 million deaths worldwide. Number of the COVID-19 cases have been increasing over time, and in some Southeast Asia countries, as shown here. It is critical to monitor the strain circulation, given its impact on the disease and the vaccines used. If you recall, the very first strain was isolated and detected and sequenced back in December 2019. It is known actually for any viruses that they get mutated over time and have had impact on transmissibility, virulence, and effect on the vaccines. And lately, we have seen that Omicron has more mutation compared to the other variants of concern, particularly on the spike protein S1 that is the target of the vaccines. And we also know now that Omicron strain is more transmissible compared to the Delta, for instance. So Omicron is now the predominant virus circulating, or a variant of concern circulating globally, except in Southeast Asia. Omicron is also circulating predominantly in Asia, including Southeast Asia. For Omicron, there are different lineages that are detected now. The BA2 is now taking over the BA1 in Asia. But what we know as of today, there's no difference in terms of risk for the hospitalization between the two lineages, BA1 and BA2. There is a higher risk or higher rate of reinfection with Omicron. There is also a cross protection observed between the BA1 and BA2 lineages. Moreover, it has been observed that the level of neutralizing antibody titers to BA1, BA2 is lower compared to that observed with the wild-type strains of SARS-CoV-2. So these are actually, as of today, the knowledge on the Omicron being circulating globally. Now, in terms of vaccine development for COVID-19, I have to say the last 2 years have been quite crazy. I have never seen such a vaccine development. When you look at the different vaccines that have been developed, there are at least 7 different platforms or technology used in the COVID-19. You have seen mRNA vaccines, DNA vaccine, viral vector vaccine, inactivated, live attenuated vaccine, protein subunit, and also virus-like particle vaccines. As of today, there are more than 340 vaccine candidates still being studied, and we have more than 100 vaccine candidates being in clinical setting, in clinical human clinical trials, if you will. And if you recall, the very first vaccine that was authorized in less than a year or so, which is remarkable, was mRNA vaccine. And usually it takes a decade to develop a vaccine, especially a new vaccine. So it has been a scientific achievement and scientific breakthrough for COVID-19 vaccine development. Now we have 30 vaccines being authorized for use and seven vaccines being qualified for EUL vaccines. And all the approval has been based on 2 to 3 months clinical data for authorization. Now, when you look at this slide, just a recap slide to show the very first wave of vaccines have been authorized based on the efficacy demonstration, based on 2 to 3 months data to go to licensure. And you can see here the efficacy or the level of protection ranged from 50%, which is the minimum estimate for efficacy required by regulators, to 95%. And mRNA vaccine was the very first one authorized for use in the context of emergency use. And you can see here on the slide, some of the vaccines have been funded by the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CEPI, and they are from Novavax, Moderna, and also from AstraZeneca or Oxford vaccine candidates. Now, in terms of challenges that we had encountered, before I get there, I just want to emphasize also, in addition to the very first wave of vaccines being authorized, you have two other vaccines that had shown efficacy based on the efficacy demonstration, comparing the investigational product with the placebo group. You have the Clover vaccine that had shown 100% efficacy against severe COVID-19 and hospitalization, and 84% efficacy against moderate to severe caused by any strain. And at the time of the study conduct, actually, the predominant strain was the Delta variant circulating at the site level. And lastly, the Clover efficacy trial showed 79% protection against COVID-19 of any severity. And for Clover vaccine, it's a subunit protein vaccine adjuvanted with CpG-LM. And this vaccine has also been funded by CEPI for its development. On the right-hand side, you might have seen also the Sanofi clinical trial, efficacy trial, that had shown lately through the press release 100% efficacy against the severe form of COVID-19 and hospitalization, 75% efficacy against moderate or severe form, and around 58% efficacy for symptomatic COVID-19 in an environment with Delta and Omicron circulating. So it would be interesting to look at the efficacy of Sanofi vaccine against Omicron strain. Since time goes by, as I said, there are more than 30 vaccines being authorized for use, 7 EUL vaccines. It has actually become harder and harder to conduct clinical trials for different reasons. On the one hand, we need to continue generating additional data to address the questions related to durability of the vaccine in terms of protection, the long-term safety, looking at the long COVID-19, for instance, and we need to also understand the value of the vaccine in different populations, such as immunocompromised population, very young population, pregnant women, for instance. And we have seen over time that the protection, there's a waning protection that has been observed, leading to reinfection of the vaccinated people, requiring a third dose of vaccine, the so-called booster dose, with the same vaccine, which is also called homologous booster, or with another vaccine from another platform for heterologous booster. And multiple studies have been conducted with a different combination of boosters being given to the different population. And technically, actually, the baseline, the background has dramatically changed for COVID-19. And we know that there are different strains circulating, Omicron being the predominant one for the time being, and the seropositivity rate, or the seronegative people, is less compared to the past, and it has become harder and harder to do clinical trials. For instance, you can no longer do an efficacy trial giving the vaccine or the investigational product to one group and a placebo to another one. It is no longer ethical to do so. So most of the time we need to change the design of the study, and we need to shift from the efficacy demonstration to non-inferiority or superiority, comparing the investigational product with EUA vaccine. And it's also a challenge to do such a design or to conduct such a study on the ground, because it's very difficult to get the comparator vaccine that is being authorized for use, because the EUA vaccines or EUL vaccines are predominantly reserved for a national immunization program. And as I said, it's very difficult now to recruit subjects that had never been exposed neither to the infection nor to the vaccination. So for all these reasons, it's very difficult and challenging now to do more and more clinical trials. On the other hand, we know that we need to develop more vaccines. And as you can see, there are more than 100 vaccines being studied in clinical stage. Now, I just want to show you on these slides, beyond the clinical trial setting, the phase 3 or pivotal study, where you want to show either efficacy or the non-inferiority or superiority of the vaccine, you need to also generate data in the real life setting, if you will, that is called the vaccine effectiveness. And here I just saw this update from WHO showing on the left-hand side the vaccine effectiveness following the primary series with the 2-dose regimen, for instance. And you can see over time that there's a waning protection requiring a booster dose. On the right-hand side, you can see the performance of the vaccine, different vaccines that are studied on this slide, AstraZeneca, Janssen, Moderna, or Pfizer BioNTech vaccines. You can see here that the after booster dose, effectiveness or value of the vaccine is higher compared to the primary series. And as I said, we still need to do such a study beyond the licensure stage to look at the value of the vaccine in real life setting. Now, I just want to show you this publication. COVID-19 pandemic has had a substantial impact on global health as observed for the last 2 years. It had also highlighted the importance of international cooperation to effectively combat SARS-CoV-2. Despite this impressive scientific achievement, barriers such as the vaccine cold chain and multiple forms of intellectual property protection stand in the way of equitable access and fair allocation. You can see here on this slide, the large nodes represent the relevant entities, while the edges represent agreements on patents between the two entities. And the smaller nodes around the entities represent patents that were identified as being relevant to the underlying vaccine technology. In the history of vaccine manufacturing, it has never been done in the past, at least not to that extent. Now, I just want to highlight here that in anticipation of the global vaccines need, there has been this great initiative, unprecedented initiative to access vaccines, and it has been put in place through the COVAX facility. 190 countries had subscribed to the COVAX facility, including 90 countries from low and middle income settings. And they had subscribed to the COVAX facility to access the vaccine. This effort has been led by CEPI, WHO, and Gavi, aiming for a supply of 2 billion doses of EUL vaccines by end of 2021. This has been identified as a potential challenge deploying the global vaccination campaign. And it has been done greatly by WHO, CEPI, and Gavi. It was aimed at ensuring equitable access to the vaccine. And we still see that if we fail with the access to the vaccine, it will generate mutants. And it has been observed to some degree. Now, the emergence of Omicron that has been spreading much faster compared to the vaccine, to the other variants of concern, it had shown that Omicron is highly transmissible, and it has somehow accelerated the booster strategy on the one hand. On the other hand, millions of vaccinated people had gotten sick from the Omicron strain, but the vaccinations help prevent the severe form of the disease, which is the primary goal of the vaccine. Looking at this map, vaccine inequity remains and is more pronounced in Africa compared to Asia. I just want to show here this very nice publication showing that ASEAN member states had subscribed to COVAX, as I said, and they had deployed the vaccination campaign in January 2021 for some of the countries. And the last one that had started the vaccination campaign had been Laos and Brunei in March 2021. Now, this is just a snapshot of the vaccination coverage for the primary series. And you can see the primary series coverage ranges from 40% for Myanmar, as mentioned by Dr. Ra, up to over 80% for other countries in Southeast Asia. Now, at IVI, we had decided actually to also contribute to combat COVID-19 pandemic At the institution, we are looking into different vaccine candidates, and our approach had been to offer our expertise to different stakeholders, different vaccine manufacturers at different stages of the clinical of the vaccine development. You can see here the different companies that we have been working with, or organizations we have been working with in preclinical stage to test, if you will, the vaccine candidates in small animals, for instance, or to test the clinical samples with the different assays that are required for COVID-19. In terms of clinical development, we had also supported different organizations to test the vaccine in humans. And you can see here that we have been involved in early stage of development as well as in late stage of development with the pivotal studies. And on the right-hand side, we also got funding to support the capacity building for some of the countries in Asia and also in Africa to get ready to get into a pivotal study for efficacy demonstrations, for instance. So as such, IVI has been somehow supporting the COVAX, has been supporting the COVID-19 vaccine development to over 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines contributing to COVAX from our end. Now, as a conclusion, I just want to say here that actually it's not a one-off because we had received a series of warnings in the past with other pandemics, for instance, with the bird flu, the SARS-CoV, and Zika. And there is really a need to address the underlying drivers, whether it's related to ecological change, climate change, social sciences, and geopolitics situation. We faced again the choice to change or not at all. It's not over. The pandemic is not over, as we have seen, even though we had reached a high vaccination coverage and booster coverage as well in Europe, for instance, as well in Asia to some extent, people are still infected. So we need to bring the transmission down as much as we can. And it's not the last pandemic, unfortunately. And we have seen with COVID-19 that science and R&D have been put on spotlight, but the vaccine inequity remains quite high. We should not repeat the same mistake. Science and vaccines should be shared on an equitable way. And we have seen the challenges over the 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic that had led to some initiatives in the region as well as globally. For instance, there is the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergency and Emerging Diseases that had been put in place. From IVIN, as I said, we have been contributing to combat COVID-19 pandemic, and we have been working with the National Vaccine Institute in Thailand to organize this ASEAN Korea vaccine webinar towards regional vaccine security. That is also a critical point that had been highlighted with COVID-19 pandemic. And I've seen also a very great report from ADB consolidating the lessons learned from different countries, including Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam, on the way COVID-19 pandemic had been managed in those countries, part of the pandemic preparedness and response strategy. And WHO has also announced the partnership with South Korea to develop a global biomanufacturing training hub for low and middle income countries that want to strengthen their manufacturing capability. IVI has been assigned and being in charge of the K vaccine training program for low middle income countries, being part of this collaboration. And lately, I have seen also WHO has expanded their efforts to combat the pandemic by offering mRNA technology. And that is, again, a remarkable scientific achievement breakthrough with this adaptable platform. WHO will be supporting this mRNA technology transfer to additional countries in Asia. And I've seen Indonesia, Bangladesh being one of those in addition to Vietnam. So we would be very happy to be contributing to the deployment of the WHO training program. And again, I would say as the last word to conclude my presentation that to build sustainable solutions for Asia to recover and also for other regions to recover, we need to strengthen our efforts for surveillance, system, R&D, and manufacturing capability in Asia, for instance. Regulatory environment should be also strengthened, as well as a health structure and system being in place. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, meanwhile, while we are waiting, I'd like to ask one question to Dr. Wartel. You mentioned about this, your role to support vaccine manufacturing. And also you are designated also the vaccine training center for low-income country. That is very important. Can you little bit elaborate what you plan to do, particularly for Asia Pacific country?
Yes, so thank you for this question, Tora. Indeed, we had been assigned to be part of this training program with the support from the current government. So we had this program planned for 80-hour training. In other words, it's a 2-week training, going through the different topics of interest, and including there the manufacturing part. So we will be providing subject matter experts to train actually the countries that will apply to this training program. And we want to deploy the program sometime over the summer, July, August. And of course, we are now getting into further granularity for the criteria selection of the countries that will apply. So the idea is to have 400 people participants for this program, 300 outside of Korea and 150 in Korea. And we'll be deploying this program touching upon the manufacturing part with the subject matter experts. We need to also provide the quality standard, all the trainings around quality with the clinical development part as well. So there will be a 1-week program, and then we go on site to the countries to do the second week, if you will, on site. So it will be a 2-week program that will be deployed over the summer from our end.
Excellent. Thanks very much. This program will be very useful to develop much needed or also much desired the vaccine development capacity and also self-reliance in the Asian country. With that, we'd like to wrapping up, but again, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.